My name's Sharon Tapper. I'm the Executive Director of the Music Managers Forum, the MMF-US. We're really glad that you can be here today, and whether this is your first time tuning into one of our webinars or you've been to these before, we welcome you. If you're not familiar with us, here's a quick overview. The MMF-US was founded in 1993 and is the leading trade association for artist managers and self-managed artists in the US. We are a registered 501c6 non-for-profit organization, and our work is powered by the support of our members and the generosity of our sponsors. If you're not yet a member, we'd love for you to join us. Just head over to mmfus.com and click on the application button. The core of our mission as an organization is commitment to education, networking, and advocacy. Through webinars like today's, we provide ongoing professional development to support managers and artists navigating an ever-evolving music industry. Our advocacy efforts ensure that managers and self-managed artists have a collective voice in shaping a fairer and more transparent industry. We also foster connection, both virtually and in person, through webinars, community meetups, our all-day in-person summits, and we currently support a nationwide network across 9 regional chapters: LA, New York, Nashville, Miami, Chicago, Austin, Boston, Atlanta, and most recently, Philadelphia. These chapters host local events, foster peer-to-peer networking, and provide community-driven support and professional development for artist managers and self-managed artists in their respective markets. We're also proud to be members of the International Music Managers Forum, the IMMF, a global network representing managers and within over 60 companies. That includes Europe, Latin America, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Australia. So providing us with connection to managers and music industry opportunities around the world. One of the most overlooked and misunderstood rights in our industry is labor rights. This webinar is designed to help managers and artists better understand this area so they can effectively protect and monetize sound recording income worldwide. We've brought together a team of experts in this space to guide you, and we're so delighted to welcome them. We have Eleanor Steyn, who's the Deputy General Counsel at PPL, the UK music licensing organization, representing over 150,000 performers and recording rights holders worldwide. With more than 15 years in the music and entertainment sector, she brings deep expertise in labor rights and global licensing. Joining her is Tiara, who is Director of Artist Relations at SoundExchange, where she leads artist and label engagement and helps creators understand and maximize their digital performance royalties. With a strong background across data, rights, and outreach, she is a trusted resource for artists navigating today's music economy. We also want to thank Tiara and SoundExchange for their participation and support of our recent South by Southwest Summit and annual brunch. We really appreciate that support and engagement. Thank you. Naomi Asher is owner and founder of Naomi Wallace Asher Ltd. And founder of IAFAR, the Global Neighboring Rights Trade Association. A leading expert in neighboring rights and music publishing, she has spent her career championing transparency and growth for songwriters and rights holders worldwide. We also have Stacey Haber, who is co-founder and chief legal officer of AYO Music Group, consultant to DMG clearances, and co-founder of IAFAR. With over 40 years of experience as a music industry executive, lawyer, and producer, she advises artists, companies across rights, deals, and strategy. And finally, last but not least, my partner in crime at MMF-US, we have Nita Raghawanse, who will be moderating today's panel. Nita is president of both the MMF-US and the IMMF, a seasoned entertainment attorney with over 30 years of experience, a global leader and advocate for artist managers. She has advised across music, tech, policy, and is a frequent speaker on the ever-evolving music business. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sharon. All that good stuff. And it is a joy and a pleasure and interesting being a partner in crime with you. So, welcome everyone. We have great minds here. I'm really glad that you all are here to join us. Welcome and thank you for joining us for MMF-US Presents Neighboring Rights, Maximizing Global Recording Revenue. We are at MMF, that trade association, right, for music managers, as Sharon said, and self-managed artists in the United States. And a big part of our mission is making sure managers and artists have the knowledge and the tools and the access they need to build sustainable careers and maximize all their available revenue streams. So neighboring rights is one of those very crucial areas. It's incredibly important, but often it's misunderstood, it's overlooked, it's simply left on the table. Managers and artists today are definitely operating in a global business. Music travels instantly across borders through streaming, radio, live performance, social platforms, and more. But just because music is traveling globally does not mean that the money automatically follows. Neighboring rights can represent meaningful revenue for both featured artists and performers, but only if they have proper registration and credits and metadata and collection structures that are in place. So that's where we are here today and what we're going to talk about. This is a topic I'm very personally passionate about. Earlier in my career, I was involved in helping grow SoundExchange here in the United States in its earlier stages and helping to educate artists, labels, managers, the broader industry about what was then a relatively new revenue stream for so many people. And even then, we saw that there were huge gaps in the awareness and the registration and collection. And while the industry has come a long, long way, there are still many artists and managers who are missing money simply because they don't know what to look for or where to register or how neighboring rights works across different territories. So that's why I'm excited about this conversation. And we have this fantastic group of experts with us who bring their perspectives from the US, the UK, international markets, and these folks who work every day in helping artists and rights holders make sure they are properly paid. So with that, we'd love to just get started and dive into our questions. I sort of have that first question since, you all have been introduced is of just us getting to kind of dig into scratching the surface. And then we're going to come back and lay some groundwork for some of the folks who are very new to this topic. But let me just throw this out to all of you. What is the basic misconception artist managers have about neighboring rights in your estimation? And Naomi, you want to go first?
I mean, I think people don't understand it and they think that it's covered under something else. That's a huge misconception. Featured artists often think it's covered under artist royalties from the label. Session players don't really understand what it is that they're able to get. I think there's a lot of just general misunderstanding as a basic misconception.
Yeah, sure is. Tiara, did you
Yeah, I
have?
was going to say, just to build on that, I think you said it really well, thinking it's covered under something else. So, like, a big misconception with us is people think if they're registered with a performance rights organization, they're covered for neighboring rights, and thinking that it's on like the songwriting or publishing side versus the recording side. And then even drilling into that, that there's portions for both the featured performer and the sound recording copyright owner, which can lead to performers not, leaving money on the table because they think maybe it's only under the sound recording copyright owner and not for them as a featured performer.
Right. Eleanor, Stacy, have any thoughts on that big misconception?
Yeah,
I have one, but you go
you go.
first. Okay.
Uh,
The biggest misconception that I see is that when emerging artists and young managers, somebody signs up to SoundExchange or PPL or any CMO, and they think it's done, the money will flow. They forget you have to register the recordings. In the rest of the world, the rights holder has to register first, and then you have to claim them as a performer. It doesn't automatically come.
In so many cases, so true. Eleanor?
And I think for me, one big misconception is that it generates a small passive income stream, and others have touched on that it's not a passive income stream. It can actually be really important revenue stream, and it needs to be handled proactively and strategically and carefully.
Yes. In this day and age, yeah, the small checks are becoming the more important ones as other checks become smaller. So it's changed in how it's relative to that. Let's go back to some of that 101 basic stuff. Naomi, do you want to just walk us through, briefly explain the difference between neighboring rights and publishing royalties? I know Tiara brought that up as a misconception. Can you just take us through
Absolutely.
that? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, one example that I usually use when I'm explaining the difference is the song "I Will Always Love You," because people know Whitney Houston's version of the song, but it was written by Dolly Parton. So if you're in a gym in England and they're playing "I Will Always Love You" on the radio or whatever it is that is playing "I Will Always Love You," then there is a royalty that is paid on the neighboring rights side to Whitney Houston, David Foster, and everybody else who played on the recording, which is the neighboring rights side. Separately and totally unrelated in just about every possible way, there is a royalty being paid to Dolly Parton and her publisher. And those things are completely separate and unrelated. So when somebody says, "Oh, I'm signed up with BMI," well, that's great. If in that case, if you're with Dolly Parton, if you're, that side is what's getting paid. But otherwise, the sound recording and anybody who's played on that recording is a completely separate income stream that sits next to or neighbors the publishing side, which is where the word comes from. But they are separate and unrelated. And obviously in the US territory, you're getting your Sirius FM money via SoundExchange if you've contributed to the recording as a featured artist. But separately, you would be getting your ASCAP or BMI on the publishing side if you are the person who wrote the song or the publisher. And again, totally separate and unrelated. So that's the example that I tend to use because people know those two different artists as their own entities, and they understand that Dolly Parton and Whitney Houston are not the same person, and that, there are times where one or the other or both would potentially be getting paid.
Right. Thank you. And, Tiara, I know this comes up a bunch in the US and folks collecting US, that difference between featured artist and non-featured artist. Can you just sort of tell her?
Yeah, sure. Yes, absolutely. So I think it's important to understand kind of the split at SoundExchange, where when money comes in, 50% is going to the sound recording copyright owner for recording, 45% goes to the featured performers on a recording, and 5% of every recording at SoundExchange goes to AFM SAG-AFTRA and their intellectual property fund for non-featured, like background vocalists, session musicians, whether you use them on the recording or not. That's, by law. And so if you are non-featured, like I said, like session, background vocalist, you would actually go directly to the fund and they have a separate distribution process, and you wouldn't be getting the featured performer portion directly from SoundExchange.
Right. So if somebody, just on the basic side here, so if somebody wrote the song and then they also recorded it, right, their own repertoire, they are the Beatles, but maybe just John and Paul, for example, right? They're collecting their songwriter royalties from their PRO here in the US. It's ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, et cetera, et cetera. There's more and more PROs. It's a beautiful thing. And my 2 cents of opinion here. Okay, anyway.
No, but to your point, like knowing what hat you're wearing for different, bundles of rights and where the revenue streams exist for what you should be collecting, you can absolutely be the writer, the composer, the publisher, and also the featured performer and own the sound recording copyright owner. So knowing you have to be with a PRO and with SoundExchange is super important so you're not leaving money on the table. And that's not even talking about, internationally as well, if we're just breaking down the United States. So
to your point, if you've got John, Paul, George, and Ringo as the featured artists, and it happens to be a Beatles recording that Eric Clapton as a session player played the guitar on, as if they're members of SoundExchange, obviously in the US, then that is the featured side for John, Paul, George, and Ringo, but Eric Clapton would be getting his money via the fund. It's in the UK, obviously PPL would be collecting for everybody. The featured artist share goes to John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Eric Clapton is due the non-featured share for his contribution in playing the guitar as a session player on that track.
Yay, thank you. Well, let's go into territory differences then, right, in this context, and then we'll leap out into other contexts because territory differences are huge. It's a vast topic. But let's look at featured, non-featured, and rights owners. Um, Gosh, there's so many ways to go at this, but can you sort of tell me sort of those key differences, say between the US and the UK? Any of you all can jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of start and then let you guys build on that. So, SoundExchange and what we collect in the United States is very different than what we're able to collect internationally. So, in the United States, we're collecting for the featured performer and sound recording copyright owners anytime the recording is streamed through non-interactive cable, internet, or satellite radio. So, it has to have a streaming component. You can't be able to queue up the exact song you want to hear. It has to have that non-interactive digital piece to it. For those who don't know, the United States doesn't have a performance right for terrestrial radio. So if the same recordings are played on AM/FM radio, the featured performer and sound recording copyright owner aren't earning any type of royalty here in the United States. But that is different internationally. And so if you're with SoundExchange for both domestic and international, the interesting part is that we're not limited by the rights that we have here in the United States. SoundExchange is actually able to collect any available collectively licensed royalties that exist abroad. So I'll kind of start there and let you all
Yeah.
do that.
There's
Anyone
an
want to jump in?
interesting thing. Yeah, there's an interesting thing that I love about SoundExchange that doesn't happen in most of the rest of the world. At SoundExchange in the US, you as the performer can register and still be paid, even if the rights holder who owns the recording doesn't register their share. In the rest of the world, you'll never get paid until the rights owner registers the rights holder share, because there's nothing for you to claim as a performer.
Yeah, at SoundExchange, they're completely separate portions of royalties. One doesn't hold up the other. We will also pay artists directly, so we won't pay a third party or a label or a distributor for an artist portion of royalties. It has to go to the performers directly.
It's also, I think, and Eleanor, I think, can probably speak more on this, but in terms of the SoundExchange does everything by percentages. You know, if you're John Paul, George, and Ringo, you each get 25% of the track. Whereas the rest of the world is, what did you do? Did you play the piano? Did you play the tambourine? Did you clap your hands? Did you do vocals? And obviously then, depending on the society and how they process the income, it's whether there's 6 featured artists and 3 non-featured artists on this track, and that's how we're going to figure it out. Or that person played the piano, the glockenspiel, and the xylophone, and therefore that person is 3 different credits. That's how they do it in Germany. But it's a difference between, okay, who's getting a percentage of the track at SoundExchange versus what did they do, what is their contribution.
Right. And Eleanor, with over there at PPL, so how do you see the differences and what comes up that, in sort of day-to-day practice on dealing with?
So perhaps just in a kind of outline, we're a joint CMO, so we represent both recording rights holders and performers. When money is allocated for broadcast or public performance of a track, it's the monies are split 50-50 between the recording rights holder and the performer, and then the performer share is split 65% to the featured artists and 35% to the non-featured artists. I mean, I think as far as the kind of featured artist is concerned, we have a structure where we have 2 different types or 2 different categories of featured artists. So we have the contracted featured artist, which is the artist that has contract with the record company. And then we have another category called other featured artist, which encompasses sort of guest lead vocalists, etc. And there's a slight difference between that. Well, there is a difference between the share of what share of the featured artist share they get. And then non-featured performers, so that they are session musicians, eligible studio producers, can, I think they can get a maximum of 7% of the performer share.
I also wanted to mention there, you brought up producers, and I just thought I would add the SoundExchange piece for producers, which is that we use letters of direction and have a formalized process for letters of direction, which are used for a featured performer to allocate a percentage to a creative participant on a recording. And we define creative participant as a producer, mixer, engineer, remixer. And there's no like standard percent, right? They can give anywhere. Usually we see between 5%, 50%, right? But we do have that formalized letter of direction process that as long as that featured performer has signed off, we will allocate that money to a creative participant. And we can apply that to foreign earnings as well.
It's a very useful tool for artists when they are negotiating with producers, and vice versa for producers to know when they're negotiating their deals, to say, oh, you know what, I may not be able to pay you right now, but you'll get the upside on the SoundExchange royalties, or a percentage of it. Stacy, yes.
And as managers, you should be including the SoundExchange letter of direction in the producer agreement as an exhibit, so it's already signed.
Yes, it's so hard to go back retroactively and secure signatures. We say, like, before you even turn the lights on in the studio, have that printed out, get the signatures. If it's a collaboration between multiple featured performers and you're a producer, if they both sign it, you get that percentage applied to both their portions, which is another best practice as well. But the featured artist has to be registered with SoundExchange at least for the US in order for us to honor it.
Right.
In PPL, you need to get a form signed as well in order to get paid for eligible studio producer.
Yeah, it's very similar thing. Our recommendation is that you take it into the studio, or it's in the studio available to be signed at the time.
The dancing lawyer wants it in the agreement before you even step into the studio.
Sometimes. Where are there, so besides the US and UK, other territories, where are there some gaps, like where a producer wouldn't be able to exercise that, or other challenges that come up around that? Where would you see are like the tough countries to collect neighboring rights?
I mean, I think producers, if you're not also credited as playing an instrument, most countries I would consider tough countries. There are other countries that have forms, and I know that Germany does pay producers, and, there's other countries that, will pay producers. And if you're credited as programming, that will be a payable role. But it is, the word producer in some countries just means the person who owns the recording or the person who paid for the recording. So if that's what you're credited as, and that is all that you're credited as, then it is harder to get paid just in general. And, as Tiara said, going back to get that paperwork, from an estate even, or whoever, it can be quite difficult. So in the studio, agree, okay, I'm going to be credited as doing all these instruments, make sure you're credited as playing the instruments, and get that SoundExchange LOD signed, get that PPL eligible studio producer form signed, and make sure that you've opened yourself up to as many opportunities to get paid as possible.
Right. And we'll definitely go into metadata later as well on that, tracking on that. But so in terms of international global neighboring rights strategy, what should it sounds like, okay, we talk about US, UK, there's the rest of the world. What should that strategy look like then, sort of in that overall thing? And can any of you jump in to explain to us how reciprocal agreements work? And, so if I'm a member of PPL as both an artist and a label as a rights owner, what does international reciprocity look like about collecting elsewhere versus SoundExchange with Tiara versus working with Naomi, right? Like, how can you kind of jump in and explain that to our audience?
Sure. So if you register with PPL and you give us a mandate to collect for you internationally all over the world, we have around 110 agreements in place with societies in 52 different countries across the world. And through those agreements, we collect neighbouring rights income for the performers we represent and the recording rights holders that we represent from CMOs in other territories. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, no, very similarly, right? So same thing. SoundExchange has agreements with other collection management organizations around the world. They'll collect for our performers or rights owners, we'll collect for theirs, and then we kind of swap the money. But we have that business to business relationship. We have a lovely one with PPL, again, where we're, exchanging the money based on who we represent. And I would say one of the big things to mention here is understanding who you're granting mandates for and in which territories, because the worst thing you could do is grant multiple mandates, which would cause conflicts in territories if you've granted multiple mandates to different CMOs. So whoever you choose, however you choose to do it, whether it's registering with each one individually or, more of a one-stop shop kind of option to give somebody a mandate for worldwide, which would encompass all the agreements they have in place, making sure you're not overlapping in a territory with multiple mandates is crucial because that would tie money up. And knowing what your mandates are so that you're not leaving money on the table in any territory.
Naomi, thank you for that, Tiara. So, Naomi, what can managers, what should they, when they're hearing, okay, well, oh, good, my local society is collecting for me through the international reciprocal agreements. What should managers do, to make sure, like their responsibility to make sure they're not missing income from abroad? And what are some of the challenges? And, we have royalty agents out there who are there to also help administrate and, work
I
through
would
some
argue
of that.
one size doesn't fit all with neighboring rights.
Okay.
I think you have to look at who your performer is and what they do. We've mentioned the Beatles and the Eric Clapton non-featured share. Now, in that particular case, if Eric Clapton used PPL for SoundExchange for the world, then in that, I would doubt that he would be getting his full share of his non-featured contribution on that Beatle track, because it is only the 2.5% for musicians on the AFM side. And the way the fund works, they're not always sending out the data to all the countries. It can get very convoluted. So in that particular case, obviously he's a featured artist. He absolutely should be with SoundExchange, but I would argue he should have a different partner internationally. Now, whether he decided to go direct through 100 different countries or use an agent that would be going direct through 100 different countries, of which there are many, or use PPL to collect ex-US and SoundExchange to collect in the US, would be a discussion that he would have to have with his manager. Does he want to sign 100 different agreements? Because that is what he's doing. He is giving a mandate to 100 different countries. Is that something that he wants to do? And ultimately, in that particular case, it's, Eric Clapton is Eric Clapton, but obviously, if you've got a session player that is on 10,000 recordings, then is it easier to have everything centralized in one place or two places? Or would you rather them, send 100 countries, 10,000 sheets of metadata, in which case, maybe you'd be open to having things get a bit lost. But ultimately, is it somebody who does a lot of audiovisual, in which case then actually there's 9 countries that pay AV and maybe that person should be direct with those 9 countries, in which case they maybe need an agent that does go direct through those 9 countries and specializes in audiovisual specifically. So I think there's absolute merits to using each of the different options that you have. And there are a lot of options, and everybody, SoundExchange is phenomenal at collecting in the US. PPL is phenomenal. I am an independent consultant. So if somebody wants me to be their agent, I am only one person. I am not going to go direct through 100 different countries. That would kill me. I use SoundExchange for the US. I use PPL for the world minus the US, unless there's a very specific reason why that doesn't work. I have a client who did a theme song for a Japanese anime, and I have her direct in Japan for that reason. So, it is something where it's very important to talk to the different options available and develop a neighboring rights strategy that is appropriate for your artist.
Thank you for that. Stacy, you're also an artist manager, right? Am I correct? Yes. And
Yes.
so it's
Yeah.
one of those things about, so when you're dealing with artists and their team and your team, and you're looking at all of this and it seems overwhelming, how should a manager look at their responsibility and their strategy and trying to approach how best to
So my
choose the right
philosophy,
people on their team, for example?
in my world, managers only advise. They don't have to do everything for the artist. So when I take an emerging artist on as a new management client, I sit down with them and I teach them how to do the registrations themselves. We sit together and actually register. They're all DIY, so they register as a rights holder and then they register as the artist, and I teach them how to claim.
With their local society, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If there is money to be collected because they are getting radio play or non-interactive digital radio play in the States, then I teach them about the different societies and I introduce them to reps who can help because there is money to be claimed. It's more about education from a management point of view. It's not about doing. So knowing your network and knowing the rights and where their market is, where their play is for performance, that's what a manager does. It gathers the information and advises who should we hire to do the work, who should we be with registration-wise to maximize the income.
Right. Okay. Let's dig into metadata for a moment, our favorite topic, because the devil's in the details. It's the thing, right? That it's like no one wants to deal with metadata until it's wrong and you realize how much you've been missing, and then it's everything. And it's a good obsession to have. There's so much to talk about here, but like what are some of those common mistakes that you're seeing with registration, with recordings, with performer credits on metadata? What are some of the common issues? What are some of the more obtuse, issues, things where people may not realize that they're leaving money on the table or leaving something behind? And then, yeah, even in there, tell me about your systems that you have or systems that you wish were out there to help improve it as we dive into AI technologies and such that might be capturing.
Well, I know
things
Stacy
in a
mentioned
different-
this at the beginning in her misconceptions, which is definitely worth repeating, which is registering for a CMO, even granting a mandate is like not enough to collect what you're due, right? The most crucial next step is to claim the recordings that actually need to be linked to the account for payment. And that's the information we use to make sure we're collecting for you efficiently abroad. And again, both as a performer and as a rights owner, if you're both. And with SoundExchange, those are two separate processes. So we use what we call our search and claim tool in our SX Direct portal, which allows you to search our database of recordings that are either reported by licensees who are streaming music, uploaded by distributors, submitted by sound recording copyright owners. And so you're able to search by title, artist, album, ISRC code to find the recordings that are yours that should be claimed and linked to your account. And you'll have to do that as both an artist and as a rights owner if you're both. And then we use that information through our reciprocal agreements to make sure we're actively claiming everything that you've provided for us in our portal. And then the other thing we have access to is playlists with this business to business relationship with other CMOs. So we can actually see what's actually getting play and prioritizing, those claims and things like that. So metadata is crucial, knowing what to pay for. There's artists that have the exact same name. So we need to be able to differentiate between, again, performer names, like legal names, and then what recordings that you're actually featured on or own the master to.
Right. And Eleanor, over at PPL, what are some of those issues that you're seeing that are preventing performers from being paid accurately?
Yeah, so I think as others have said, I think the quality and completeness of data is really key. And if we end up having to manually backfill gaps left by others, whether that's by the recording rights holder or because a performer hasn't yet claimed, that can really slow the process down in terms of sort of timely payment. I suppose it's also worth noting that some recording rights holders sometimes store up their repertoire registrations and then deliver them to us in bulk batches a couple of times a year, and that too can slow the process down and hold up payment to performers. I suppose some examples of areas where missing data can cause issues with accurate and timely payments are where there are performer classification or role errors, where sort of a performer has dual roles, so they may have performed, they may have been the sort of artist, but also the producer, or an artist and a session player, or an artist and they're a backing vocalist on other artists' records, where they haven't kind of asserted those roles, or where they haven't provided all the band and artist names. And I suppose like it's not a repertoire issue, but not keeping your payment details or tax forms up to date is also something that can really delay or significantly affect whether performers are paid accurately or on time.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I also want to mention like qualification data. So like knowing your country of birth, your residence, your citizenship, all those things can help maximize as well. And so keeping all that information up to date.
Can you talk about qualification for a moment, Tiara, Eleanor, any of everyone? I know people bandy about the oh, you don't qualify for royalties from the UK, or you don't qualify for neighboring rights royalties from whatever. Can you explain what that is? Why?
Yeah, this is another big misconception too, like that qualification rules for each country can change based on who represents you. Like that's also not true, right? There's like intrinsic details about who you are, like again, residency, citizenship, and then where your recording was made can matter. All those different things are absolutely going to matter when it comes to qualification.
So yeah, from
There's
the
a lot.
get-go, there's rules, right? I'm just going to explain that. Like there are laws or rules or regulations or whatever you may, depending on what territory we're talking about, that say, oh, an artist in the United States, for example, may not qualify to collect for public performances of their sound recording in the UK because they do not qualify, because here's the criteria, and they don't meet any of it. Is the drummer from the UK, or was the master recording mainly captured in the UK? Is it enough to mix it or master it in a country that's outside of the United States to qualify? There's all these different pieces. So I just wanted to create that little bit of context. Naomi, you were saying.
Can I just add to that in terms of the
Yes.
qualification? This all stems back from the fact that the US opted not to sign the Rome Convention in the 60s. And
Exactly.
because of that, obviously, there has been for some time an issue with qualification for an American performer who performed in America by a recording that was owned by an American entity. Thanks to the work that SoundExchange is doing, this is largely changing. In some cases slower, some cases faster. What was it, 2 weeks ago? Ireland just announced that they would give national treatment to Americans. Canada is giving national treatment to Americans. I believe Spain is. I believe Germany is. The Netherlands, PPL is now paying the same income sources that SoundExchange pays to Americans. So whereas before you would see a huge difference as to, did you record in the US? People would fly to Sweden to make sure they recorded there so that the recording was qualifying. That's not as much of an issue now. It really is starting to close the gap. And so it's really important. People often are like, oh, well, I'm American, so it doesn't matter. And that is, one of the misconceptions that prevents people from doing this. But it actually, you can get money where you maybe couldn't have a few years ago. And it is just important to make sure that everything is sorted in some way, shape, or form, because this is, who represents you makes no difference whatsoever in terms of whether you can get paid, but the legislation changing does make a difference, and that is happening.
Yeah, beautiful.
Can
Okay,
I go
really.
back to metadata for 1 second and just give a top tip? Alternative titles. So many times there's a typo that makes data go missing. So list every conceivable possible misspelling of your titles. when you're registering them as the rights holder.
Stacey, such a great point. Okay. So I also get questions every day like, well, my song is spelled wrong or this or that. Like, so I didn't claim it because it's like every variation, every iteration, different versions, like metadata. There's no stringent laws, at least in the US, around the quality of metadata that we get, just that they have to send something where it's like, again, title, artist, album, label. And sometimes there can be missing information. It can just be misspelled. And so this is why, like, from SoundExchange perspective, we tell our registrants to check our search and claim tool at least like once a quarter. And we do like a wildcard search. So it should bring back like, if you don't click an exact match button, it'll bring back, some of those variations that might not have been caught in an exact match so that you can be claiming it. And it's like, even if it's spelled wrong, if it's yours, you should claim it. And then we're trying to clean up everything on the back end so you're not having to view a bunch of the, messy variations. But it's such a great point to remember all your versions, your variations, all those things to make sure your catalog is fully claimed.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Stacey, and thank Tiara. Naomi, okay, there's probably managers and artists here who are like, it's too much work for me to be checking my metadata all the time. This makes a case, I think, for when someone needs help, and that is called, some folks call it royalty agent, some call it a neighboring rights administrator. What are your thoughts on all that?
That's exactly what an agent does, and I mean, and there are some, and I try and stay very neutral. And as with IAFAR being an, trade association, I know a lot of agents. If somebody comes to me and they want an agent, I can recommend all sorts of agents. If they're like, oh, I'm with PPL and I just can't update it, then I can help them, or I can help them with their sound, and I do act as agent in that respect, as I said, sometimes a SoundExchange and PPL, but otherwise I do spend a lot of time just explaining who the different agents are and what they do, because it is that thing. Like if you're with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, I cannot tell you how many variations of that band there are on both PPL and SoundExchange. They're all spelt wrong. There's an ampersand, there's commas, there's not an ampersand, there's not commas. Their initials C S Y and N or whatever. Like you have hundreds for each title, that especially if they've been like a hit song for Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And do you as a manager really want to be sitting there and claiming for every single one of those for your client? That's why people get agents. It's not that, the society can't do their job. It has nothing to do with that. It's because any organization is only as good as the information they're receiving. And if you have 10,000 compilation albums that are all sending you this metadata that is fractured, then you need somebody who knows that, there is going to be fractured metadata, but Stephen Stills is Stephen Stills is Stephen Stills, and he should be on everything that is Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, no matter whether there's an ampersand or not. So that's what agents do, and that's why you have people like me, like Stacey, like K&R, like Lime Blue, like Peer, like there's so many agents. That is what they do.
Yeah. So, okay, real world scenario. If an independent artist suddenly has a viral song in multiple countries, there is going to be a question as to which types of uses have to pay a neighboring right royalty. So if it's viral and it's in the United States, right, only if it's on non-interactive streaming will there be payments made for those plays into SoundExchange, so satellite radio, internet radio, right? And then we get into other territories, right? What should a manager do immediately, Tiara, in the US market versus the rest of you have knowledge, well, all of you have knowledge, right? Of the, what practical advice would you do to prioritize internationally? What should be done? Like, okay, what's that first step? What's that second
Yeah,
step?
I mean, the first step is, I think, making sure you're registered and checking what your mandate is, right? And if you're covered in these territories and where you're covered or who's collecting in each one, and then claiming everything actively and making sure all your claims are in place. Those will be the first, like if you're using SoundExchange, you're going to log into your SX Direct portal, you're going to look at that artist profile, check their mandate, and then use search and claim to make sure everything's up to date. If the recording hasn't been reported yet and that artist or the person you represent owns the sound recording copyright, submit the metadata directly to SoundExchange that you have for that recording. It'll immediately create it, like ingest it, associate it on the rights owner side, and then it becomes available for you to claim on the performer side. So get it in there as quickly as you have the metadata, get it claimed, check your mandates, and make sure you're poised to collect.
What if the artist, oh, sorry, Naomi, go ahead.
I mean, no, and then figure out what's best for your artist. If if you've got an international artist that's getting airplay everywhere in the world, or if you've got an artist who really is only getting airplay in the US or only in Sweden or only in Brazil, or if you've got somebody who's done 10,000 cues on something that is being broadcast in every country, or if you've got a producer on a hit K-pop song, you have to put something in place. And do your research, talk to people, talk to the different potential options that you've got. Everybody is very knowledgeable that is involved in these income streams. There are a lot of people. I mean, you can contact IAFAR and we can always put you in touch with, if you're a member of IAFAR, we've got a lot of information behind the paywall. We have a glossary. We have a codicil for your will, because beneficiaries is a whole other subject of conversation. We do have information, and you can always, as a member of IAFAR, reach out and say, look, I've got this artist, I don't know what to do. And we can tell you what the options are.
Right. Thank you. Good.
Can I just calm everyone down for a second and say, one of the things that PPL is brilliant at is giving you the biggest possible window to get the registration in and get paid a little bit retroactively.
That's what I was about to ask. I was about to say,
Okay.
what if the artist manager picks up that artist as a client, finds out that, they had the viral hit and now it's 3 years later or 4 years later or 1 year later, or whatever. What is that? Stacey, that's what you're referring to, right? Is that window of retroactive? Is that right?
For the performer side, yeah. Eleanor, should you be doing this? I don't want to step on
I was going to say, what does that retroactive window look like for claiming?
Yeah, so I think the period varies from territory to territory. It's typically defined by a combination of the limitation or prescription legislation in each territory, and also the relevant CMO's distribution policy or rules. So taking PPL as an example, the limitation period for copyright infringement here is 6 years. PPL's open distribution period is aligned with that. So in 2026, for example, retroactive collections may be available going back to 2019. I think there's an important qualification to that, which is that we only license the sound recordings that are in our repertoire. So if a sound recording isn't registered with us, even if it's been broadcast or played in public within the last 6 years, we won't have any retroactive monies available. And I suppose just aligned with that, and going back to your previous question, Nita, I think you actually don't need to wait for your artist to have a viral hit or a hit at all. PPL's free to join, SoundExchange is free to join, and it's relatively straightforward process to register. So I'd recommend, if you can, register. It should just be part of the process when you're sort of working with a new artist to register.
Absolutely.
And ideally you do that before you have a hit.
Yes, absolutely. Good point. Good point. And, so, it is that thing about, okay, some folks are collecting their SoundExchange or their PPL or their, or have a wonderful neighboring rights agent that they're working with here. And, the question is, how do I maximize a check? How do I get a little bit more? Like, what are some of the strategies around that? And, we could go on in a whole other webinar potentially about that. But, I'm going to turn this to Tiara for a second. SoundExchange collects a whole lot of money. It sounds like what, almost $1 billion?
Yeah, $1 billion a year,
Billion
over
a year.
13 billion to date.
Where's most of that money coming from?
Most of the money is coming from satellite.
Satellite radio,
So
Sirius
satellite
XM
radio, if you're talking like where you should try to prioritize airplay and where you want to place music in the United States, I would recommend satellite. Rates are like $50 a spin, so like 25 to the artist, 25 to the rights owner. And so that's definitely going to be where most of the money is. But we've mentioned several times we cover internet radio, like Pandora's non-interactive tier, iHeartRadio online, cable, those music choice cable stations that stream music, and different college radio stations online, like several, over 3,200 different services that we list on our service on
Yeah,
our
but if you only
website.
have so many hours in the day,
Yeah.
maybe prioritize getting plays on satellite radio. Eleanor and PPL, or any of you here, like where are you seeing some of those nuggets of, kind of like the bigger licensing uses in
Yeah,
in
so
the pie that's collected?
yeah, I mean, for us, it's probably our kind of national broadcasters. So the kind of big commercial radio stations, the BBC, the big television broadcasters. We also license public through our joint venture with PRS, the PRO, UK PRO, public performance venues. So yeah, I mean the sort of the main, the thing where you want to kind of focus your energy on getting airplay for your artist is on the kind of big national stations with substantial reach.
Good, good.
Can I
Excellent.
make two comments about
Sure.
this?
Go
The
for
first
it.
one
And then we're
is
going to
that,
questions.
sorry, the first one is that the only stable income in neighboring rights where you can guarantee every year you will get probably about the same amount and it'll be a high amount every year, Christmas music. Because the same 100 songs, roughly, give or take one or two every year, will be played in public, will be played on terrestrial radio, will be played on satellite radio. The same songs over and over and over again from October to January every year.
And not just in the Western world, all over the world.
Most places that pay neighboring rights that will have that consistency. If you are on a Christmas song that is one of those sort of 1 to 200 songs that you hear consistently every year in those specific places where neighboring rights and digital sound recording royalties are paid, that will be a constant check for you.
Yes.
It's important, I think, to stress that another difference between neighboring rights and publishing is that live does not pay neighboring rights and interactive streaming does not pay neighboring rights. So obviously, if you've got 700 million streams on Spotify, chances are you'll be sampled in a public performance, situation, and you'll get money for that. But if you are never played on the radio, satellite or terrestrial radio, and you're performing live, but you're not doing anything else, then your neighboring rights income is not going to be the same as what your publishing income is.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you for that. So, Sharon, are you coming back to help us with our questions? I know that we have some beautiful questions sitting here.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
So
Hi,
we've
thank
got
you.
some great questions. I'm going to start with Bailey Cook. Said I recently joined Centric to be my publishing admin as a self-managed independent artist because I heard I need to make sure I was collecting more worldwide. Is there any concern that I'm in the US and they're based in the UK and also having anything conflicting since I'm also registered with SoundExchange, MLC, and BMI?
Centric is a publisher. They're not a neighboring rights agent, or unless you've signed up specifically with them as a neighboring rights agent, but I don't know that they are. I think that they're just a publisher. So they're unrelated to this.
Okay, so, but you're with SoundExchange, but that's for the US. So Bailey, if you've got other things in the rest of the world, you need to be with folks doing that, such as PPL or one of the agents here from IAFAR or in that team.
I wanted to add here, it might not be obvious, but I just wanted to say it. Like, for example, with SoundExchange, you don't have to be a US citizen to sign up for international royalty collection, right? With PPL, you don't need to be a UK citizen to sign up. And as Naomi has said multiple times, like there's not a one answer for everybody, right? It can change based on the type of artist you are, the way you do your business. But I just wanted to say that up front because there are different benefits. So like with SoundExchange, if you're a US performer, there's like tax treaties and things like that that you could benefit from, but you don't have to be a US citizen to use us. Same with PPL. You don't have to like use.
And if Centric has a neighboring rights agent arm now, which is great, I didn't know that they did. If they did, then that's still, that's an agent. So obviously, if they've asked that agent to collect for them everywhere but SoundExchange and they're doing SoundExchange directly, then that's great. It's just important for them to be aware of what they've told Centric to do if they've asked Centric to do their neighboring rights.
So Bailey, go and ask those questions. We have anonymous attendee. My artist is in Quebec and they're registered to SoProc.
SoProc.
Is that right? Should they also register to SoundExchange?
So again, SoProc is based in Canada. So based on the mandate they have with SoProc, right? Like, are they giving them just Canada? They can also register with SoundExchange for just the US or for worldwide minus Canada. Like, again, it depends on how you grant your mandate and just making sure you're not conflicting in a territory. So if you're claiming US royalties through SoProc, then you don't need to claim directly with SoundExchange, but you can if that's how you choose to do it.
You have to do the research and find out where the airplay is, because you want to be direct where your airplay is.
Got another question here from Bailey. In your professional opinion, acknowledging you'd be if an artist with a business brain is capable of administering your own business in general, could an artist omit publishing or publishing admin? Obviously, we have things like the MLC, SoundExchange, PROs, distro, of course. But when it comes to publishing, basically in a nutshell, would it be crazy to think I could manage it myself?
I mean, I think that's a question that, well, first of all, this isn't publishing, this is neighboring rights.
Yeah,
So
this
they're
is a
totally
different-
separate.
Yeah.
But I think that goes down to you as a person. Like, if this is something, I mean, a lot of artists just don't have the time or inclination to do this. In all honesty, could an artist do this? Absolutely. They can join SoundExchange, they can join PPL, they can do the work. Do they want to? Do they have the time or the inclination? And that is where, it's something that only they can answer. And they should really just be clear on their BMI for publishing, their SoundExchange for neighboring rights in the US, maybe their SoundExchange for the world. They just need to know what it is that they've done.
Yeah. And it's again, it's like a left brain, right brain thing. What is your skill base?
Yeah.
Right.
Do you
Try
have an
it.
inclination? Yeah.
Sure, give it a go. But
Although I have to say, I cannot give professional opinions as a lawyer. Nothing I'm giving you here is a legal opinion.
I got Linda Ferrando. Thank you for being here, Linda. Linda is the chair of our New York chapter, so appreciate her being here. She's asking for a resource perspective. Does a Google or Excel or whatever type of check off sheet of all this information? Oh, that would be useful to have. So artists and managers can make sure that everything that needs to be done is listed for each track and can be checked off as it goes along. She has her own version. But does such a thing exist? Is that something that exists with SoundExchange?
I mean,
or
we
PPL or
don't have a
anywhere else?
checklist at IAFAR, but we do have a lot of other information. So from all the information that we have, you could make a checklist. I don't know if PPL or SoundExchange has a checklist. I've never seen one, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist.
I want to say the form, Tiara, before
Yeah, it's like I
to
don't know
fill
that I have a
out.
beautiful one pager that is the checklist that does need to exist. And I also know there's so many companies who are being created right now that are like, this is their sole purpose, is they want to have checklists where you know where to register your recording everywhere, register yourself. But yeah, it's like all the information is here. Please feel free to reach out. We can definitely help guide you along. You have great resources on this call. Please reach out. We'll get you the information you need.
And every rep has a spreadsheet that they will send to new clients and ask you to fill in for every new recording.
Yeah, if we're talking recordings and
rights
metadata, yeah.
holder.
Like
Yeah,
SoundExchange has like an ISRC ingest form with all the information you need to provide. But as far as knowing like where you need to be registered and all the things you need to be doing with different companies is what I was imagining. But we definitely, our portal, we try to make it as easy as possible and as intuitive as possible to submit and claim everything, and like bulk claiming tools, bulk uploading things. So we want to make it as time efficient and as intuitive as possible.
Wonderful. Michelle Wiesmeslin, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here. Hi all, thank you. This is for everyone, but especially for Tara. I've received info about SoundExchange adding Mexico, Kenya, Panama, Paraguay, My rep said this was only for the master side, not for the artist side. Is this correct?
So what I would say here is our website is up to date. So what we do on our website is provide every territory and CMO that we have agreements with. And if it's on the performer side, the rights owner side, or both. And there's check marks, it's all right there. So every territory you need to reference, you can see if we have an agreement there and on which side.
Yeah.
In this moment, I want to just interject something that I think is an important nugget of information around rights owner versus artist side. So, for example, a lot of folks are using distributors to collect their rights owner portion. For example, if you go to CD Baby or any of the number of TuneCore, any of the number of distributors, sometimes you opt in and they collect your rights owner SoundExchange, for example, right, which is your neighboring right side. But because, Tiara, you mentioned earlier that there's
Yeah.
a rule
Yeah,
for
it's
the.
such a great point that you're saying this, Nate, because I also get this question all the time.
Good.
If you do opt into an agreement with your distributor that says we'll collect your sound exchange royalties, most don't know that that's only the sound recording copyright side. They cannot collect performer royalties for you. So even if you opt into that agreement, you still have to register directly with Sound Exchange to collect the performer portion
The
or
performers.
through a mandate with another country.
Right.
But yeah, they are like SoundExchange has that strict policy that we won't pay a third party. A distributor is considered a third party. We won't pay them the performer share.
Yeah. And Tiara, I don't know if you mentioned how long Sound Exchange holds on to
Oh
the
yeah, our retroactive period is 3 years.
3 years. So be careful, right? I know, yeah, lots of folks who think that they're getting all their Sound Exchange monies and realize there's a whole other chunk of change sitting over there at Sound Exchange on for the performer side of them that hasn't been collected because they need to come direct. And yeah, so,
And
Naomi, it sounded like you wanted to say something.
internationally, the equitable remuneration has a designation where, again, it's not allowed to be paid to the label. I mean, if the artist is the label, that's well and good, but they have to have two separate accounts, two separate, things. It's not, this equitable remuneration is not allowed to be given to anybody other than your designated beneficiary when you die. And it is, something that you can sell your income stream. You can't sell your equitable remuneration. You can't give that to somebody else. So, you can have somebody else collect it for you and work on it for you. But, if you've signed with a digital distributor, first of all, be aware of what you've done, because if you haven't given them the right to register your recordings, then they are not doing that, in which case you must do that. And if you have, that's great for the master side, but that has absolutely nothing to do with the performer side.
It's perhaps just worth adding just on the question from Michelle about Mexico, Kenya, Panama, and Paraguay, that Latin America is I think a growth area for performer remuneration, as is Southeast Asia, as is the Middle East, and I think performer collections in those territories will come. So just worth flagging that it's still sort of emerging, but I think there will be growth in those territories in the future.
Great. Well, so I have one more question, although I always have 100 questions in my head, but given that we're almost at time here, looking ahead, what changes do you see coming in neighboring rights over the next few years that managers and self-managed artists should be preparing for now? Tiara, what's going on rates in the US with Sound Exchange, or, is there on internet radio or satellite radio?
Yeah.
Or you mentioned national treatment. What is
Yeah,
that?
I would say, yeah, the right proceedings are happening currently because there were some judge issues in the United States. So we're in, still the midst of setting the rates for the next 5 years. But in general, with Sound Exchange, it's about advocacy, right? And just like especially fighting for national treatment in these territories. And so that being said, there's not really anything that artists and managers have to do for that. It's something that, Sound Exchange is supporting legislation and, fighting for, again, especially United States performers to, have these rights in these other territories, and hopefully establishing a performance right in the United States.
On the other hand, it never hurts to write your congressperson.
Correct. Yes.
Ask for what's rightfully yours. Yes, U.S. performers should be getting paid from terrestrial radio. MMF-US is a huge advocate of wanting to make sure that we get a terrestrial radio right in the U.S. and really what's called a full public performance right. And it's really it's a shame that it's not happened, and it's a gap in our copyright law here in the U.S. that we really need to.
For those who want to support, the legislation's called the American Music Fairness Act, and yes, you can write your
Thank you.
congressperson.
Exactly. And what's happening abroad? Is there any changes we should be looking at for the
Well,
future?
Naomi mentioned, Ireland was the most recent to grant, and so I think there's like 8 countries, like main countries, kind of left that aren't doing it yet. So our hope is to keep pushing and, hoping there will be more news on that coming up.
And what do you think are global trends, Eleanor, Naomi, and what can managers do? Stacey, even, what can managers do to be better over the next few years at this?
I think,
I would give you my top tip for managers in the UK is that we have a blanket license here. If you are validly registered at PPL, PRS, and MCPS, then you're automatically can be considered for sync on the broadcast networks here without any kind of approval. You're automatically in. And that's a great way to get yourself sync opportunities. That very small chance, thousands and thousands, but it's something, and it has happened.
I would just tell everybody to make sure that your artist is sorted, that you understand where you've given their mandates, that you know who's registering the rights holder side, that you know what the picture is, that you either you're direct with societies, you're with an agent, whatever is best, that you understand what's going on, because ultimately you're not going to get paid if you don't sign yourself up, and if you're getting airplay, you are going to get money as long as you put yourself in a position where you can receive it.
Are there new markets that we all should be paying attention to, that are growth areas? I know we mentioned for a moment that in South America or in Latin America that there is that growth. Is that an area that you're seeing, is there something specific there?
Eleanor, I know that PPL has been very active in trying to get the Middle East and Asia to pay. I know that they've spent a lot of time going to China and Saudi Arabia and whatnot. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think we've been I suppose an example is that in the UAE, they recently set up their first CMO. So it's very early days, but we've been kind of supporting to help get the sort of CMO set up and the infrastructure there. And I think that's because we see that there is an opportunity there and an untapped market there for collections. And I think, it will take a while for things to get up and running and for licenses to be issued and users to pay. But it's a sort of long-term goal, medium to long-term goal.
Right. Well, Sharon, we are at time, are we not? Yes.
Indeed. But thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much. We had a wonderful discussion here, but I know that there's probably a bunch of other questions. So yes, Tiara, Naomi, Stacey, Eleanor, thank you so much. And I hope that, we can all reach out to you. And if we need have any other extra questions and need information. And we thank you so much for being here to give us all of your expertise. Sharon, I'll turn it over to you now.
No, just thank you for being here and providing our community with power and knowledge to navigate what is a tricky industry at the best of times. So really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And thank you to everybody who attended. We love providing this and staying connected, and thanks for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank you too.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Bye.